We are not ready yet. We are just like elementary school students learning the basics. The Bermuda Triangle is actually a warp in which a parallel universe connects to our world. When the time is right, the three chambers beneath the Sphinx of Egypt will be opened, and when that happens, everything will be known. My name is Samuel Chong. I'm a certified court interpreter and a Chinese translator in Los Angeles. I work mostly with lawyers, doctors, and I sometimes translate for business meetings as well. I first learned about the book Thiaoouba Prophecy back in 2014 when I was searching for books written by ET contactees. After reading the book, I couldn't put the book down because it contains a lot of fascinating information that I was later able to verify and validate. The book talks about the author Michel Desmarquet's personal experiences of being taken by this group of advanced ETs to their planet for 9 days. It happened in 1987. He didn't know why, but he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. So he walked outside of his house, and then he was lifted up to the middle of the air, where he saw this beautiful, tall ET who said to him that they were going to take on a journey. After arriving on the planet, he felt great compassion and love from the inhabitants, the Thiaoubans. And he also discovered that the Thiaoubans are people who never age. So they're forever looking like in their 30s because they can regenerate their body tissues and cells. They can also perform all the miracles as performed by Christ, as described in the Bible. They can communicate through telepathy. They can levitate. They can heal all the diseases that you can think of. They can also project images onto Michel Desmarquet's brain. Michel, the author, was told about the history of Earth, where we all came from. And indeed, we didn't come from apes or monkeys. We all came from different planets originally. A lot of the facts mentioned in the book can be verified. For example, when Michel entered into their spacecraft, he was disinfected using yellow light and blue light. It turns out that the Harvard Medical School had a research paper indicating that certain wavelengths of blue light have antibacterial antiviral effects. And also a few years ago, there's another research paper indicating that certain wavelengths of yellow light also have antibacterial effect. I was fascinated by the content that I decided to track the author down. In the postscript, it says there are far more incredible things that the author, Michel Desmarquet, wasn't allowed to write in the book because we were far from understanding them. I was very curious to find it out, so I determined to ask him in person. According to the book, the ETs from the planet Thiaoouba have been guiding us throughout history. Jesus, according to the book, was indeed born out of Virgin Mary. He was born from the embryo implanted by the Thiaoubans, the ETs, just to show people at that time that someone extraordinary was going to be born this way, and to fulfill the prophecies. The young Jesus, even though he was highly spiritual, he couldn't perform miracles. This is because when the astral body goes into the embryo, it has to pass through what the ancient Nagas would call the river of oblivion, forgetting all the knowledge to perform miracles, and forgetting all his past lives. The young Jesus traveled to India, and this is why some people say that Jesus went to India and died in Japan. This is why if you do a search, you are able to find the tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. A lot of the events documented in the Bible were accurate. For example, after Jesus was born, King Herod killed many babies. According to this book, he killed 2,606 babies. And also, the Star of Bethlehem existed. It was one of the spacecraft of the ETs, the Thiaoubans. Christ, on the other hand, was an ET, an extraterrestrial, from Thiaoouba. They had to send one of their own to Earth to preach about spirituality and love because people at that time, as well as people nowadays, were highly skeptical. They wouldn't just believe the teachings of anyone. Someone had to perform miracles. And because Jesus didn't have the ability to perform miracles, the Thiaoubans had to send one of their own. So they made a body that resembled the body of Jesus, and then one of the Thiaoubans entered into that body. And Christ remembered all the knowledge to perform miracles. And he began preaching. This is why when Christ first saw his mother, he didn't call his mother mother, he called his mother woman. Because of the special relationship between the mother and the son, not a single language in the world in which a son would call his mother woman. It just doesn't happen. Christ indeed was crucified on the cross and then resurrected 3 days after, just to show people at that time that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. But for some reason, the concept of reincarnation was later removed by the Catholic Church Council meetings. The book is very specific in the sense that they named the 4 Catholic Church Council meetings that intentionally distorted the original meanings of the ancient scriptures of the Bible. It says there are the Council of Nicaea, AD 325, the Council of Constantinople in AD 381, the Council of Ephesus in AD 431, and the Council of Chalcedon in AD 451. It actually encourages people to follow the teaching of Christ, but not to be religious, because organized religions tend to serve their own purpose by acting as an intermediary agency between us and God. We can actually connect to the source, the great ether or God, directly by praying, by meditating, or just by having a good night of sleep, so that we can connect to the source through our higher self. One of the most important sentences in the Bible is the kingdom of God is within you. When we have challenges in life, we should look inside for answers, and not to follow a specific religious leader, not a politician, and definitely not a specific mainstream media. The book also explains that God is God, but when the Bible mentions about angels or Jehovah's, they're actually the ETs from the planet Thiaoouba or Jehovah. And a lot of people ask why they don't just show up. Well, it's not the time yet. In the ancient civilization of Lemuria, the ETs from Thiaoouba did contact them and paid them regular visits because the civilization of Lemuria was highly advanced spiritually. We are not ready yet. According to the Thiaoubans, we are just like elementary school students learning the basics. The book also explains who made the Great Pyramid of Egypt. It turns out that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was constructed by a great learned person from Atlantis called Thoth. He was also known as an Egyptian god, but according to this book, he is a regular person. It's just that he had the knowledge so that he was able to line the stones of the pyramid perfectly, so that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was used as a tool to capture the cosmic and terrestrial energies. In other words, it's the energy center. The users of the Great Pyramid of Egypt were able to meditate and concentrate and project their thoughts from the top of the pyramid so that they could communicate with people of different planets. They also used the Great Pyramid to make rain. There are some people nowadays who hypothesize that the Great Pyramid of Egypt is actually an energy center. For example, Chris Dunn wrote a book proving that it is, according to his research analysis, it is an energy center. The Bermuda Triangle is actually a warp or entry point or a portal in which a parallel universe connects to our world. People, planes, or ships near the portals get sucked into the portal, into the parallel universe. And in a parallel universe, time stops and people don't feel any pain, hunger, or thirst. I find that to be very interesting because there's a very famous private investigator called David Paulides who wrote the Missing 411 series of books documenting very strange cases in which people just gone vanished in the national parks in the US and Canada. He documented very strange cases in which people just disappear out of a sudden, and the dogs cannot smell the scents of the people who just vanished. And when the rescue teams searched many times in the location, they sometimes find that the corpse of the people who disappeared reappear in the places that they searched and researched many times. In some of the strange cases, it seems that the corpse or the people didn't feel any pain because they walked to their bones. So it's very coincidental, and I find that to be very interesting because according to Michel Desmarquet's book, people in a parallel universe don't feel any pain, hunger, or thirst. The ETs have all the abilities to do miracles, and they were also able to take Michel Desmarquet, the author, to his past lives. Michel had 80 past lives already. According to the ETs, we learn spiritual lessons in each of our past lives. And I'm going to quote a book. One day you're a beggar, and then you can be a queen, such as La Biola, who of course was not only at the top of the wheel, but also learned a lot and greatly helped others. And yet, in many cases, a beggar will learn as much as a king, and in some instances, he will learn much more. When you were ascetic in the mountains, you assisted many more individuals than in most of your other lives. What counts most is not appearances, but what is behind them. When your astral body takes on another physical body, it is, quite simply, in order to learn more and even more. You should always bear in mind this main point. An astral body, in all cases, must conform to universal law, and by following nature as closely as possible, it can achieve the ultimate goal by the fastest path. In a sense, we live in the world to learn spiritual lessons. Our physical bodies is just a tool for us to use. When we die, we give up this physical body, taking the spiritual lessons that we learn to our higher self. This book also explains ghosts that some people can see. When one passes, one's astral body leaves the physical body. The astral body is composed of electrons. 81% of electrons will leave the physical body and go to the higher self after 3 days. And this is, by the way, why Christ resurrected 3 days after. The other 19% of electrons remain in nature. And because of the static forces, the electrons appear like the person who was living before. So it resembles the appearance of the person who just passed. And because electrons also have memories, they frequently haunt the places that they hated or loved. The book also talks about time machine, describing that there is a psychosphere, or what some people would call the Akashic record, rotating at 7 times the speed of light around Earth, or a planet. It records everything that happens on planet. So the ETs took Michel to the past, about 14,500 years ago, before the continent of Lemuria sunk into the ocean. The ETs also encouraged the US scientists to develop a time machine. It encouraged the scientists to match the vibrations of the psychosphere to the 7 times the speed of light instead of wavelengths. It reminds me of the Philadelphia experiment, in which the US military was trying to make the ships disappear by projecting certain energy or wavelengths of energy onto the ships in order to cloak the ships. According to some documents, there was a distortion of time and space during the Philadelphia experiment. And the ETs are saying that we are able to develop the time machine if we are able just to match the vibrational frequencies of the psychosphere or the Akashic records at 7 times the speed of light. We are able to go to the past, but the future depends on our collective consciousness. Even the Thiaoubans, the ETs, cannot predict what's going to happen after 100 years. They say that we need to change our ways so that we can make the future a better future. They are having Michel Desmarquet to write this book to warn us that we need to change our ways, otherwise we'll be heading a catastrophe. Speaking of the 4 real dangers on Earth, the number 1 is money. As we all know, a lot of the industries, such as the pharmaceutical industry, the energy industry, and even the educational industry, they all revolve around money. They have to serve the interests of their shareholders. A lot of the inventions are suppressed. For example, Stanley Meyer in the 1970s invented a vehicle that ran on water. However, he mysteriously passed away or died of a very mysterious illness before he was able to commercialize his invention. It was well publicized in the news media at that time. Politicians only serve their own interests. They only care about their re-elections, power, and fame. Journalists mostly report on the sensational news because negative news sells. But according to the Thiaoubans, according to the ETs, it will cause criminals to imitate the crimes that they report on. Journalists instead should report on the positive news, news about people who help others, news about the compassionate people. This way, readers will be able to improve their psyche by following the footsteps of the people who help each other. Drugs meant hallucinogenic drugs. According to the ETs, hallucinogenic drugs damage the astral body of a person. I did some research and I found that some of the aura readers can distinguish whether a person uses hallucinogenic drugs or not, because the auras or the energy fields of the person who uses hallucinogenic drugs look very ugly. The person who doesn't use hallucinogenic drugs, the aura appears to be more beautiful. And according to the book, human energy fields are very important in predicting whether the person will develop illness or diseases. Religions, according to the ETs, are a curse on Earth because we should be spiritual, but we should not be religious, because religion tend to serve their own purpose. After the book Thiaoouba Prophecy was published, Michel learned about the Book of Enoch. After reading it, he was very surprised because what he personally experienced was very similar to the description in the Book of Enoch. He believed that Enoch was taken by the same group of ETs to their planet. The book also talks about the creation of the universe. It says in the very beginning there's a great spirit, or what some people would call God, a great ether. It is a pure spirit, It imagined everything that it's going to create. Then a big bang or a big explosion occurred. It created the stars, the planets, animals, plants, and people on Earth. When it created people or human beings, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each one of us. So in a sense, we are part of God, and God is part of us. The reason for God creating human beings is for him or it to experience the sorrowness or happiness of human life. Because it is a pure spirit, it wants to experience through a physical world. A lot of people ask me what he didn't put in the book and what he told me. Michelle told me that the ET told him not to tell anyone else about that matter. I have to keep my words. What they didn't tell me was that I couldn't write an article about it, revealing as many hints as possible and giving as many clues as possible. And that's what I did. And the title of the article is The Second Coming of Jesus Christ. Actually, a lot of the descriptions in the Bible are accurate regarding the second coming of Christ. For example, in Acts chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, it says, "And while they were gazing into heaven as he went, behold, two men stood by them in white robes, and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." Yes, indeed, if and when Christ comes again, he will come from heaven. There are many other clues in my article, and I would encourage you to take a look. Michel Desmarquet also tells me some of the things that he didn't write in the book. For example, he says that when the time is right, the three chambers beneath the Sphinx of Egypt will be opened, and when that happens, everything will be known. It reminds me of what Edgar Cayce said about the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx. The information is very similar to what Michel told me. And Michel also told me some of the things that he told me personally regarding the Sphinx. He says that it has to be a special way to open the three chambers, because even using modern technology, if we use explosives, the three chambers will not be opened. Michel also says something that he didn't put in the book regarding the Greys. He says, indeed, by the year 1995, the Greys put about 150 implants to the people on Earth just to monitor us, to see how we respond to the increasingly decreased immune system, because they are having the same issues. They wanted to see how we respond to the same situation, because we have been losing our immune system since 1948. During my second trip to Vietnam, meeting the author, he told me what else he knew but couldn't write in the book because the Thiaoubans or the ETs didn't allow him to do so. After I learned that fact, I decided to devote a lot of my time to promoting the messages in the book to as many people as possible, and also in different languages. Because the one event that Michel Desmarquet told me about does not just relate to the people in the US or people in China or India. It relates to the people all over the world. So I think we really need to know what we need to do and to make better choices for our future. Because only through our collective actions, through our international efforts, the future can be made a better future. The Thiaoubans can only envision what's going to happen in 100 years of time into the future. They cannot predict what's going to happen more than 100 years from now. They are giving Michel Desmarquet stern warnings, telling him to record everything that he sees accurately without changes, so that we can learn from his experiences and to take the warnings that he was given seriously. I think it's time for us to act and also to decide our future together. We live in this world to learn spiritual lessons, and we should follow the teachings of Christ to love, to forgive, be humble, relate to God our own, seek for spiritual knowledge, and grow spiritually. And I hope that every one of you will learn your own spiritual lessons and to fulfill your life mission. Thank you.